This podcast is sponsored by A. Miller George Funeral Home, where each life is celebrated, and their sister company, Cremation London and Middlesex, both family-owned and operated. By Hyde Park Care Pharmacy. Experience the difference an independent pharmacy can make for you and your loved ones. Hyde Park Care Pharmacy offers personalized care, short wait time, very competitive pricing, easy transfer of your prescription, and much more. And by Molly Maid. During these times of COVID-19, it has never been more important to keep your family safe. With the Healthy Home Cleaning System, Molly Maid London is here to help. Make your home a healthy haven. Call Molly Maid London today. Today, we're excited to be a part of the book launch for Dr. Robyn Henderson Espinoza's book, Body Becoming, A Path to Our Liberation. Body Becoming offers us a way of understanding the body beyond constructions, political or medical, industrial, complex defined, towards cultivating the body as important in our endeavors to build a more inclusive vision for democracy.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another edition of the Vicar's Crossing podcast. The Vicar's Crossing is a virtual space where faith intersects with the public square. And we're glad we've connected with you today, wherever you may be. I'm Rob Henderson, and I serve as the priest at Holy Trinity St. Stephen's Anglican Church in London.
Kevin George here, also hanging out in London, Ontario at St. Aidan's. Glad to be with you.
My name is Ian. I'm the producer and the person who sends this podcast out into the world. I hope you're having a good day.
Indeed. This is a great day, Ian. It's book launch day.
You're right.
It's book launch day. It is.
It is a great, fantastic, terrific, awesome day.
Yeah.
And we have a book that we are going to launch today with our special guest who will be joining us in just a moment. Excited to be part of the launch of this book. I'm going to hold it up for our YouTubers. There it is. Body Becoming, A Path to Our Liberation. And the book's author is one of our favorite guests, and they've been with us before. Dr. Robyn Henderson Espinoza will be joining us here on the Vicar's Crossing. Dr. Robyn is a non-binary, transgender, and queer Latinx activist scholar. Their dynamic and inspiring presentations explore the intersections of queer justice and anti-racism, working to dismantle supremacy cultures and displace the toxic culture of whiteness. They are passionate about gender justice as human rights work and bridging differences within our communities, our campuses, and our churches. And Dr. Robyn will be here shortly.
Yeah. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Robyn and you are not related, right?
No, we are not related as far as we know.
Because I got the Henderson thing. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Was that in the last podcast?
I think it probably was, but I have to ask. My memory is not good, Ian.
Fair.
So before we go any further, obviously we want to acknowledge and encourage you who are listening, wherever you are, to find out what territorial lands you are upon. But certainly as we record this here in London, Ontario, we are on the territorial lands and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenapehoak, and Attawandaron peoples, which are connected with the London Township and Sombre Treaties of 1796 and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. These lands continue to be home to diverse Indigenous people, Métis, Inuit, and First Nations with whom we choose to walk the path together towards reconciliation.
And as always, we want to take a moment too and say thank you and acknowledge our sponsors here on the Vicar's Crossing. First to A. Miller George Funeral Home, where each life is celebrated, and their sister company, Cremation London Middlesex, both family-owned and operated. Our thanks to Dave Mullen for his great support here at the Vicar's Crossing.
Thank you, David. And to Hyde Park Care Pharmacy, locally owned, locally operated, locally loved. Get yourself away from all those big box things and those multinationals. Come on over and see a local community pharmacist here in London. She'll look after all your needs. Carol Basada, thank you.
And last, but certainly not least, we want to say a huge thank you to Molly Maid. Make your home a healthy haven. Call Molly Maid London today. And Trisha Lister was the wonderful human being over there who hooked us up with that. So thank you to them over there.
Thank you, Trisha. Yeah.
Very good. Very good. Shall we do our ever popular segment, gentlemen?
Well, you can have a go at it.
We can try it. Okay, we'll see how this works out. Because it didn't work in rehearsal. So let's try this again.
Let's give it a go.
It's time now, ladies and gentlemen, for the segment we like to call, hey, Kevin.
Yeah.
Who did you book this week?
Oh, gosh, I'm ever glad you asked that. A drum roll, please. Well, I tried to get this through your head a couple of weeks ago, but I didn't book anybody because like we've got all kinds of guests. We have great guests coming up. Like we've got Dr. Lisa Miller coming up. We've got Brian McLaren coming up. We've got Tony and Susie Troxler. A great story there of a couple who in her Susie is 50 when she gave birth. Okay, so we got them coming up soon. We've got Clayton Thomas Mueller, who's his book was nominated for Canada Reads, coming up. A beautiful Canadian writer, fantastic Indigenous writer. So we got so many guests coming up. I didn't book anybody.
We are booked.
We are booked.
Basically, what you're saying.
We're booked, man.
That's great.
We are booked. We're in demand. Let's just put it that way.
Well, we'll find a new segment that's a bit more exciting for folks. Maybe next time we gather, but we are booked. So that's the good news. And we'll look forward to chatting with all those good folks, including, that's right. Yeah. Including Dr. Robyn. Excitement is on the way. Yeah. Yes. And Dr. Robyn is on the way. And so let's begin our conversation.
Let's launch a book.
And there's the book.
Yes.
And here's the author. Dr. Robyn is back on the Vickers Crossing podcast. Great to see you again. How are you?
Thanks so much. It's great to be here. It's wonderful to see y'all. I can't wait till we're in person to have, are we tea drinkers, coffee drinkers, bourbon drinkers?
I like the IPAs myself.
Yes.
I was excited to read that in your book. And I said, I think when Robyn gets to Ontario, we're going into the IPAs.
Yeah.
Any appropriate adult beverage would certainly work.
Great. Yes.
That's great.
Yeah. How's everything in Nashville?
Good. We have had a really strange winter and early spring. It rained for like 10 days straight, and there was flooding, and but now we're expecting a wintry mix this weekend. So spring has yet to be sprung here.
Yeah, we're in that weird space too. We had like 17 degrees Celsius the other day with rain, like sunshine and then rain, and tonight it's going down to -8 or something.
Right.
So I don't know what the Fahrenheit
right
are
now.
but it's snowing outside. So we're in that in betwixt time where nobody knows what's happening.
Yeah.
Anyway, look, I'll tell you what's really exciting though is you're giving birth to a book on March the 29th. Well, you've done it already, but you know what? That it's like a big day around here because my compatriots here, my comrades, it's their birthday.
Oh,
so your book is being born on the same day as these two.
Very cool. Very cool. That's very exciting. Cool.
Awesome.
Very cool.
So we're excited.
Happy early birthday.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you for including us as a part of this exciting day of book launch because we're releasing this on the day of your launch. The book is just incredible, and I couldn't recommend it enough to people to read. You helpfully break it into 4 sections, talking about rupture, becoming, difference, and repetition. I want to begin by speaking about rupture, if we can. I wonder if you can share with our readers a little bit about this part of body becoming. I mean, I think people often consider rupture to be a negative or a bad thing, right? Like something ruptured, and we should be very concerned. But you connect this more with a sense of a disconnection or a breaking, and note that it can be a good thing, but most of all, it's something to pay attention to, and that paying attention to it is really what's critical. So can you say more about that?
Yeah, when I think about rupture, rupture always goes with becoming.
Yes.
It's the aha moments that cause us to rethink or retrace our steps. And it's also the, oh shit, what happened? Right. It's both of those. Ruptures can be good or bad. They are almost always followed by some aspect of becoming or change. And as we saw, a real global uprising against anti-Black racism in 2020 and 2021, we can see that those were kind of like cosmic ruptures or global ruptures where people were having aha moments, and also probably the oh shit, what do we do now? Our world is against minoritized bodies, and so it's a both and thing, right? It's a how do we fix the thing that's broken, which is really the task that I take to hand in the book.
Yeah.
And how do we fix ourselves?
Yeah. I think that that's the thing that strikes me about this book actually is that, you know, we've talked about it on here a lot about how the pandemic has been sort of revelatory in the sense of apocalyptic, right? And that,
Yeah.
you know, right. So there's that, as you say, it's both, oh, now I see. And then once I see, it's, as you say, that perfectly good theological term, oh shit.
Yeah.
How did we get here? Like,
Yeah.
and I think the big thing then that which you do so skillfully in this book is that you raise a number of questions. And that is to say, you're quite open about admitting that you don't have all the answers and that we don't yet have all the answers, right? That this is a great discerning that we need to do. But this whole process for you has been around entering into deep and difficult questions, and you've obviously leaned into them with great integrity. In considering what is a body, you reflect on your own journey, not only as a reflection of your own gender transition, but also looking back to your own body's history.
Yeah.
Has led you to have insight about your brain aneurysm that you suffered as a teen, and insights with recent neurodiversities and that you've been discovering.
Right.
Can you share more about that journey with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you know, I didn't pay much attention to the impact of the brain aneurysm, or maybe that my brain works differently. I didn't really take that into consideration, that my body was impacted. And I think it's reflected in the ways in which I was so disconnected and was living life from the shoulders up, really, you know, in earning a PhD and then sort of entering the world with, you know, being newly minted as a PhD, but like not being embodied. And so I had to go back to those events, those events that my body carried, from sexual abuse to brain aneurysm to gender transition. You know, I just had to go back and sort of filter through the impact, and then realize we are all living with impact. I think about how cis men are socialized into the world not to feel, for example, and to compartmentalize, right? Like we are all impacted in a variety of ways. And until we figure out how to have a relationship with our bodies and how to be in relationship with the felt sense of our bodies, only then can we begin to heal our democracy. And so I don't know, I think going through, and it's, you know, going through my own history, it's not without complications, right? I had to sort of, you know, write content warnings, and I had to prepare people, you know, to read, and I had to prepare myself to sort of go down memory lane, and certainly recounting the stuff that happened in Charlottesville. You know, I needed to sort of sit with that and sort of mull that over. And I think what we don't realize is how impacted our bodies are by living in this world.
Right.
And if we could do better with paying attention to our bodies, we can do better with being a body in the world.
Yeah, I think that's so critically important. And Ian is going to ask you something a little later on about that Charlottesville piece of the book. But so I won't go down that lane now. But I just want to pick up on what you said in terms of a conversation evolving in my own parish this week with a group, and they were talking about the things that are going on in their own lives and to their own bodies, and they were dismissing them because of what's happening in Ukraine, right? And saying, well, but it's nothing compared to,
right.
But my reminder to them was, it's not either or, right? It is both and what you need to know right now is that what's happening in Ukraine is playing out in front of our eyes. And so one of the things I was cognizant of in my body this week is I was off on Monday and I watched too much news. And so by the end of the day, I think I'd seen like a dozen bodies up close and personal strewn across sidewalks in Ukraine. And that had an effect on my whole being for all week. Everything that happened was impacted by that.
Yeah.
And I think that we sometimes don't realize just how much these things have an impact. And then, as you say, that alters how we relate to one another.
Yeah.
And necessarily alters how we relate as a society, a democracy, and everything else. Am I wrong? Or
That's you've got it. You've got it. I was on a radio show yesterday, and the host said it's a little bit like Russian dolls, nested Russian dolls.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great metaphor.
Mhm.
You know, you pull a string here and you find that it's connected to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Our bodies are the same. You know, it's kind of like the butterfly effect. You
That's
know,
right.
what I do here impacts y'all on some level, you know.
Yeah.
So I just want us to be mindful of that. And I want to, I want to be a good ancestor in many
Yes.
respects. I don't, it's like, I don't care about the applause or fame or how many books I sell. I just want to do good in the world. And in order to do good in the world, we need to be in right relationship with ourselves, with each other, with society, and our planet.
Awesome. Yeah.
One of the components in considering rupture as part of body becoming, you talk about in the book, is discussing, which bodies actually count.
Yeah.
And the reality is that they don't all count in the sense of how we see that. And I want to read a little quote from the book. You're right. We live in a society that would have us believe that only certain bodies count, which is why the hashtag Black Lives Matter is so necessary, because we've created a hierarchy where power over certain bodies has determined their fatal fate. Why is it we don't want everyone to flourish? And why don't we consider the bodies that don't look like us as fully human? I still can't believe that while white women got the vote 100 years ago, Black women didn't get the vote until the 1960s. Whose bodies count? And you point out in the book, when we consider that, we've all borne witness, of course, now to the death of George Floyd and the Breonna Taylor and the brutal murder of Ahmaud Arbery. We should not be surprised that democracy is a consuming, raging fire around us, big time. Can you say more about your own experience of learning what bodies count? Because this is it certainly was revelatory to me. Talk about opening a new path to look at as I was reading this.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, I think that, I think 2020 and 2021 were big aha moments around who counts in the world. And I kind of feel like the veil was lifted on structural and systemic racism. And I think, had it not been for the person who recorded the George Floyd murder, I don't think that we would be having this conversation in the same way.
Yeah.
But because the violence was, because it went viral,
right,
we were all sort of confronted with, is this humane or not?
Right.
And I think we had a collectively as a world, we had a chance to sit with, is this right or wrong?
Yeah.
And I think that question morphed into this question that I'm asking.
Yeah.
Okay, well, then what bodies count? And I think for a lot of white folks who obviously want to be anti-racist, want to be pro human flourishing, I think we're stretched to reimagine, okay, what humans do count, what bodies count in the face of systemic injustice. And I think that we're still left with trying to answer that question, because if you look at what's happening here in the States, in places like Florida and Texas and Iowa, where if you're a parent of a trans kid, you could receive a felony and life in prison for taking care of your kid.
Wow.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
That's just
right. And so it goes back to this question: what bodies count?
Yeah.
And how do we care for the least of these? And so I'm sort of consumed with that question. How do we care for one another? And how do we steward each other in right practice?
Well, and I think what you say in the book too is we can't study our way into it, right?
Right.
It's I mean, we're all reading the books, right? We're all out getting the,
Yeah.
I mean, because we've come off of the 2020, 2021 unveiling, so to speak. And
Right.
everybody's bought the books, and we've read the thing, and we've brought on the guest, and we've, but it's you write about it again, about an embodied experience that, there has to be this relational reality in order for us to be able to sort of enter more deeply into those further relevant questions, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I get very scared about people with talking points.
Yeah.
People who are reading all the books and they have the right answers, but they have no embodied awareness around anti-racism or any injustice, class, classes, So I hope this book helps people create an embodied awareness, because that's really the message of Jesus in many respects, right? He would ask people, well, do you want to be healed? And that question, I don't think, is rhetorical. You have to feel it, right? You have to know it, not just as a piece of discourse, but you've got to know it deep in your body, deep in your soul. And until we know on that level, we will continue to fight the systemic issues.
Right. Yeah. I just, I mean, sorry, Rob, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and no, we were talking about this the other day because we were doing some Lenten reflections, and know that the answer to that might lead you to the cross.
Right.
Might lead you to some form of death and sacrifice.
Yeah.
That it's not like, we say, was it Will Willimon we were talking about, who said, the gospel is good news, but it's not good news for everybody.
Yeah, that's
right.
So there's going to be something, to that.
Yeah, he makes the point that we can talk about what the good news is in Scripture, but it's going to make some of us very uncomfortable,
right?
Because it's and that is a part of being the body too, right?
Yeah,
we talk about the body of Christ, and it's John Caputo. We talked about this last night in a Lenten series we're on. Talks about the cross as an event, and about how the cross is something that doesn't dispel or get rid of things, but it exposes things,
right?
And it brings things to light, that then over and over again as an event give us the ability to sort of really get embodied in conversations and in relationships.
Exactly.
That may be difficult or messy or uncomfortable at first or at times, but it's where we're meant to be.
Yeah.
We're not meant to be siloed,
Right.
In fact, we're disembodied when we're like that, right? I mean, I think that's a part of what we're experiencing in the culture writ large, and it's why we have trucker convoys, and we have, it's because we're disembodied. I mean, there's this thing that we're, anyway. You talk about the next section in becoming. In this section of the book, you offer a very personal example of your own experience of becoming embodied, and just a brief quote, and then I'll have a question for you on the other side. You write, "The body I have is light-skinned and conditionally white. So I move in the world with power, access, and privilege. I'm also masculine of center, meaning I express myself in some form of masculinity. And I'm also trans, non-binary, and gender non-conforming. And my mind works within the autism spectrum, where I miss social cues, don't always know how to respond in certain situations, and depend on friends and comrades to help me through sometimes difficult interpersonal situations, because my brain doesn't compute in neuronormative ways. In addition to weekly T dosing, this testosterone, and leaning into the body, I envision for myself, I hope soon to have top surgery where my chest will differently contoured, and I will fit more easily into my body. I want to wake up each morning in a body that I know, but even that is up in the air as I imagine what kind of body I long to have." I got to say, I read that and I just thought, how incredibly brave and honest of you to share like this with us. As you point out in the book, you are non-binary, transgender, Latinx, and one day soon you hope to be in your body, is the word you said a little later than that. Talk to us about how hearing of considering your own story or stories, I guess, and the narratives of other people's bodies might disrupt our collective imagination and shift the narrative of what embodiment really looks like.
I'll start with a tweet that I saw earlier today. I talk about Twitter being my most abusive relationship. I saw a tweet today about it was just really toxic, bad theology, but this guy, probably a white guy, was saying the reason why this woman is so mad is because she doesn't have anyone to dominate her.
Oh, Lord.
And which I think is an extension of sexual assault culture or rape culture.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think it's things like that or it's that kind of ideology or that kind of theology that creates the questions that I have. And I say it that way because I didn't just arrive as a disembodied, disconnected, disassociated person by myself.
No.
It happened because I was socialized and internalized the teachings that I received from the church. And so recovering my body and recovering my story has really forced me to think about, okay, what is a body? What is a body that I want? How do I achieve that? And who am I in relationship who can help bring that to pass? Because if we think that trans bodies are just bodies that people are mutilating and reimagining, that's a misstep, because so many trans people are imagining their bodies in deep relationship with other people in community, and really community is shaping bodies. And so when I talk about, trying to be recognizable to myself, I need to be deep in community with other people who are also recognize me. And so that's why pronouns are so important. When the right pronouns are used, then that the body politic is shaping in such a way to be recognizable to self and other. There's a sort of poetics to the repetition of waking up every morning in a body that I don't recognize. And yet I look at myself and I look at pictures of my grandparents, and I look so much like my grandfather right now.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, what is that like? And
yeah, that's an interesting sort of twist on becoming, right? Too, like, you're becoming more aware of that resemblance.
Yeah.
One of the things you share in the book too is that you've Kevin alluded to it. You had 2 brain surgeries when you were younger because of aneurysm.
Yep.
And you said one of the effects of the surgery was that you developed this, you call it fear of death, really, and you described that as feeling separated from your body, and you were aware of that. And you tell a story about you were doing a CPE unit, like a clinical pastoral education training unit, and you talk about your relationship with your supervisor at the time. I wanted to read a little bit about that for our listeners. And you wrote, "He thought he knew everything, including my own biases and fear of death. He was a Lutheran pastor and one of those old school guys who had an answer for everything. He believed his antagonism would somehow help me, but all it did was me off and remind me that once again, another white man wasn't listening to me when I spoke about my fear of dying. When will we ever begin to practice empathy when people share their fears and concerns with us?" And living through a global health pandemic, that fear of death resurfaced in a new and strange way. Even though the disconnection is not material, I can feel and sense the separation between mind and body, the disconnection in my emotional self. Could you share more about that experience of that disconnection, and perhaps even what you've discovered so far about, how to bridge that divide between self and body?
Yeah. I think facing one's mortality when you're 16 years old does a number on people.
I'd say so.
I think about children who are diagnosed with, things like cancer or whatnot that are, they've not lived long enough to sort of develop a sense of death. But I had lived long enough to know that that I will die at some point. And I think that the fear of death somehow or another accelerated my disassociation with myself. Um and I lived a long time with the fear of death, and I wonder if it's related to me being cut off from my ancestry, both the Mexican side of my ancestry and the white side of my ancestry. And so I've been doing a lot of just sort of sitting with ancestors and trying to piece together those stories. And I think that we not only do we live in a death culture, and we've not processed the amount of grief from the global health pandemic, but we also don't know how to grieve as a society.
Right.
And that not knowing how to grieve also accelerates disassociation. And so, I'm sharing my story is, I mean, we could sit down over a campfire and really talk about death and loss and grief as a way to heal the disassociation, because we all live with those tentacles embedded in us. And I think about other cultures who grieve for weeks with their family member in their home, and or Jews who sit Shiva,
Right. Yeah.
We just don't do that well. And and I think it shows up in our body politic and in ourselves.
Well, I mean, everything is prepackaged now. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, even the whole industry now. I mean, like I thought about that actually when I read this question of Rob's, that section where that question comes from. I was thinking about how we live in a culture where, and with cremation becoming increasingly more popular ahead of any service, that you talk about being disembodied. That one of the things I've noticed as a pastor, particularly with younger people, is it's really hard for them to get their heads around all this, because they see Papa alive one minute, and the next minute there's a little box on a table at the front of a church, say, and we're so afraid of sitting with a dead body. Right. And so what are any thoughts on that? Like, I mean, in terms of just what we're doing when we, and I mean, please send emails to Rob about this, but not to me. I don't care if you get cremated. Go ahead. I mean, I'm offering an observation on the fact that there is something unhealthy about the fact that we're afraid to be in the presence of a body now, where the community I grew up in rural Newfoundland, out on the East Coast, just like you're talking about, I mean, it wasn't uncommon still in my younger days to know of people being waked at home in the living room.
Right.
I mean, it was just the way it was. And we don't
I
do
remember
that
being
anymore.
10 years old, and I was told to go up to the body and put a hand on Grandpa.
Right.
And now I tell my kids about that, and they're like, "Oh, I'm not doing that."
Yeah. Well, I remember doing my CPE residency. So this was a year-long clinical pastoral education residency, and I was in a trauma hospital, and I worked in critical care with very sick people. And one night when I was on call, I got a call that someone had died. And so I went and I sat in the room with the dead body, waiting for the family. And I probably sat there for 2 hours and no family came. And, I went back, there's certain procedures that have to happen when someone dies. And the family wasn't coming. And I thought to myself, this person died alone. And so someone should sit here and show respect.
Sacred.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so I sat there.
Good
and I was writing poetry during that time, and so
Yeah.
I wrote about, loss and grief and death and dying alone and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, we don't know how to sit.
Hmm.
We just don't know how to sit with people,
It's true. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Wow.
Before I ask this next question, I just want to give a trigger warning for the question, because I'm going to ask a question about hate and violence and the Charlottesville. Um, I don't want to say incident, but what happened in
yeah,
Charlottesville.
yeah.
Um, in considering difference, you also write about bodies, violence, and embodiment. You share with us a little about your experience in Charlottesville, Virginia, when you went to a protest against the Unite the Right rally. Can you describe the feelings you had in your body while in Charlottesville, but also how emails, tweets, and harassing letters also impacted you after the event? And you also write about your body was absorbing hate in ways that continue to impact you. Can you share with our listeners about that story and about what happened there?
Well, it was several years ago, and when I arrived in Charlottesville, you could almost feel the energy. It was palpable. And
Mhm.
obviously, on the day of the rally, it just there were so many people and spectators who had come out to sort of watch. And there were militiamen, there were lots of guns, there were
Mhm.
neo-Nazis. There was just a lot happening.
Mhm.
And I remembered feeling quite nervous, because I don't exactly I'm not the kind of embodiment that neo-Nazis love,
Yeah.
and so I felt threatened. I felt
Oh, yeah.
like, oh, this could I could be harmed, and what do I do about that? And so uh I I mean, I was standing on the corner of Second and Water, which I write about, and all of the sudden, there was lots of movement on that corner, and I turned and looked, and these neo Nazis lunged in my direction, and Antifa absorbed the violence that was intended for my body and probably Tracy Blackman's body, and
Mhm.
Clinton Wright picked me up, and my shorts were falling down, and
Wow.
things were just moving so fast, and then got into the fence-in area for the media, with some state police, which is also not a place where I want to be, with a whole bunch of state police people.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, these cans, which we think were filled with concrete, started being lobbed in our direction. And I thought, well, gosh, I'm not safe. And, where do we go? It just was a very tumultuous time. And, you ever have that feeling where you can feel the hair on your arms stand
Mhm.
up? It was kind of like that, but for a while.
Yeah.
And I just felt on edge. And, later we found out that our hotel had been compromised, and,
Wow.
I was trying to relocate, and someone tried to get into my hotel room. And so I called folks where there was a safe house, because I was like, well, I don't feel safe staying here.
Mhm.
It just there was a lot happening, a lot of moving parts. And we have to remember that um I got out safe. Yes, I started to get hate mail and packages mailed to my house, and apparently someone had my address, but someone died
Right.
that weekend. And this was someone who was out there advocating for peace and
Mhm.
justice. And you talk about the cross being an event. I think that we see how those crucified events happen a lot, and to the least of these.
Yeah.
And I'd like for us to be a better society so that we can eradicate violence and hate from our discourse and from our practice. But we've got people whose ideology is one way or no way.
Mhm.
and so we remain polarized. And yeah, I mean, even just look at how Putin is calling Zelensky a Nazi.
Yes,
He's
Right.
he's leveraging anti-Semitism,
Mm-hmm.
using, he had some come to Jesus moment, and so he's like an evangelical Christian.
Yeah.
So he's weaponizing his evangelical Christianity against Zelensky. And we need to be wise about what's happening here, because that move will further marginalize our Jewish kin, and
Yes.
probably our Islamic kin.
Mhm.
So we've got a ways to go before we are a healthy body globally.
I think the thing that strikes me as I listen to you tell that harrowing tale is, because that's just wow. I mean, what strikes me is all I could hear in the background in my brain was perfectly good people on every side.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I mean, clearly not. Like, I mean, for those bodies and that experienced the violence and death that they experienced, and I think that, I think I was thinking about this week about the whole Putin and Ukraine stuff. He spent the last 4 years dividing America
Yeah.
to set up for this situation,
Right.
And that there are people in America, a place which has been a harbinger of freedom to call people to the shores and so on, would now be a place which can't agree that dealing with Putin is a good
Right.
is a good thing.
Right.
It's as though now all of a sudden we question whether the bodies in Ukraine are valuable enough too.
Right.
And now we've got, like in our country here in Canada, we said we'll take unlimited numbers of Ukrainians, but we didn't say we'd take unlimited numbers of Afghanis.
Right.
We didn't say we'd take unlimited numbers of Ethiopians.
Right.
I mean, and we have to be honest about these, to back to the earlier conversation about what bodies count.
Exactly.
Prince William and Kate said this week, let's be honest, he says, this is not like Africa. This
Right.
is here in Europe. They said out loud.
Right. I saw that. Yeah.
The part that we've all been saying, what is going on?
Yeah.
They talk about revelation. Holy moly. It's being made for us. Anyway.
Yeah.
We have a change of subject, but also a new segment on the Vickers Crossing called Listener Questions. Listener Questions. And today's question comes from Jordan Sandrock. Jordan is studying theology at Huron University College, and they are also currently working through a combined Master's of Divinity and Master's of Arts. Brilliant human being. Jordan is also the student minister at St. Aidan's Church, and I see them every week. And I just want to say before we get this question going, I see them every week, but I just roll out of bed when I start doing the services on Sunday mornings, and sometimes I feel like I might come across as rude to Jordan, but it's just because I'm on autopilot. Anyway, this is their question for you.
Hi, Robyn. My name is Jordan, and my pronouns are they, them, theirs. I'm a student, and I was wondering how you would characterize the relationship between embodiment and a person's relationship with God, especially for a trans person or a racialized person.
That's a good question. I think that God is in all things, even our bodies. We can't really capture. We don't really know who or what God is, right? We have these ideas. Jürgen Moltmann popularized years ago panintheism, meaning God is in all things. And I think God is in my gender transition. I don't like to talk about transition in a linear fashion, but in my gender becoming. And I think those of us who are racialized differently or are gendered differently, that God is part of that. And I think that we've not done a good job as church and society to talk about how God embodies difference. And I hope that this book will help start a conversation around embodied difference, and that God does embody difference?
A great question, Jordan. Thank you.
That's very incarnational, Rob.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So this is kind of cool. I learned a new word reading your book, Robyn, which is somatics. I
Yeah.
hadn't heard of somatics before. I thought that was kind of cool. You know, it's a good book when it sends you to YouTube to take a look at what's actually happening with this.
Right.
But
You know, Rob, I got to interrupt you and say you've been going to the wrong counselor, because my counselor talks about somatic experience all the time. You're just not as you just don't need as much therapy as I do. If you went to therapy more, you'd know what this is.
That's what it is. Yeah, I got to check in more once in a while. But anyway, this is something you said, you've recently discovered too, thanks to your partner, Aaron, and you write about that in the book. And you write that somatics is a slow functional movement. It's not designed to be exercised, though some movements might feel like exercise. Somatics invites us into the art of feeling our materiality, a real piece of connection with mind and body. And I thought this was a really neat thing. Can you tell us more about this and how that can, lead to embodiment? And maybe you could even give Kevin and Ian and I a little something to do when we're done here today that we can go off and try on our own.
When I think about this, I think about, and maybe we can do this together. Can we just take a few breaths together?
Yes.
Yeah.
And maybe our listeners can do this with us when they listen to the episode. But can we all together breathe in curiosity and breathe out fear? Can we breathe in imagination and breathe out indifference? We just did somatics together.
Hey,
I like it.
Yeah. I mean, like, that is an embodied practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
I love the breathing in together and the breathing out in community, because that can really set the stage for a different kind and quality of conversation. When you invite people to breathe in curiosity and breathe out fear, I think people have the social courage to lean in a little more.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a wonderful way to, I'm thinking, how many groups do we lead, Kevin? Small groups, large groups, Bible study, whatever. What a wonderful way to start our time together. As always, wrapped in prayer like we usually do, but
far better than
say, that space. Yeah.
Far better than say, tell me about your favorite food or whatever.
That's right.
Those silly check-in things where everybody has to come up with something they remember. Or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a total waste of time, and nobody likes doing it. But as you say, what Dr. Robyn is talking about here is about leaning into someone's, giving someone the experience that they will participate in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's a great gift of community. All right. Well, hey, look at that. The Body Becoming. Today, we're launching the book. Off it's gone. There it goes.
Just the same way the two of you were launched on the 29th of March.
That's right. Yep. That's right. We were launched that day as well. So we got a triple launch ceremony going on today.
I don't know if launch is the correct term for
Well, I'll ask your mother at church on Sunday. I'm going to ask Donna if Ian was launched on the 29th of March.
I mean, I came out in 30 minutes, so hey, I guess that's fair.
And just so y'all know, we're having an event, and there's an online component, and if you don't already have the link, I can send it over.
Awesome. Yeah, I have that link as well, and we'll put it in the information. And this episode, as if you're listening to it now, it's out first thing in the morning.
Great.
And so the event is later in the day. By all means, join in this great launch event. I'm happy to be promoting that on this end of the border for you, Rob.
Thank you. And I'm looking forward to being with y'all at some point.
Yeah, we got to make that happen.
Can't wait for you to get up to Canada here.
Thank you.
Spend some time together. And Dr. Robyn, thanks again for your gifts, your book, your generous time that you've given us today, and for being such a friend of the Vickers Crossing. We appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good to be with y'all. Can't wait to be back.
And thanks again to Robyn Henderson Espinoza for joining us today. And today's book launch, the book's available today, Body Becoming, A Path to Our Liberation. Great.
Yeah, they were excellent.
Check in with them, and looking forward to maybe seeing them in Canada.
Yeah, we got to work something out and have them up here, because I think it'll be a great, we could have a couple of really great events in this city. So send us your emails, give us your ideas.
Thank you, as always, to our sponsors, to the Vickers Crossing, to A. Miller George Funeral Home, where each life is celebrated, and their sister company, Cremation London, Middlesex, both family owned and operated. Our good friends, Carol and everybody at Hyde Park Care Pharmacy, locally owned, locally operated, locally loved. And hello to Tricia and everybody at Molly Maid. Make your home a healthy haven. Call Molly Maid London today. And that wraps up this edition of the Vickers Crossing podcast. I'm Rob Henderson from Holy Trinity, St. Stephen's in London.
Kevin George here from St. Aidan's.
My name is Ian. Thank you for listening.
And remember, Kevin, my friend, wherever you go this week, remember to always look both ways
Before you cross the street, or you will become a dead body.
Thank you for listening. Our hosts are Kevin George and Rob Henderson. Our producer and composer is myself, Ian, with original artwork done by Elizabeth Dodman. If you have any questions or want to know where to find us, tweet us at Vickers Crossing or find us on Facebook at The Vickers Crossing. If you have any other questions about anything heard on this podcast, leave us a comment or look in the description to find out more. Thanks!